So our next speaker, I'd like to invite her to the stage, and her name is Triana Silton. Triana is, well, some of you who've been with us for some time, you know that CALCASA has been working with unions. Unions are very powerful. They do a lot on behalf of workers, and they have the ability to create a lot of change. And so Triana is part of the leadership team for the Service Employees International Union's United Healthcare Workers. They fight for healthcare justice, affordable and accessible, high-quality care for everyone, provided by respected and valued caregivers. She knows firsthand the power of a collective voice and the critical need to develop leaders in underserved communities. CALCASA has had the privilege of working with SEIU UHW, along with other SEIUs, and we're so impressed and just amazed at the work that's happening here with UHW, and Triana is largely responsible for that as well. Thank you.
Thank
Triana.
you. So it's really an honor and a privilege to be here today, and I've been so inspired by the work that we've done with CALCASA. I started in the labor movement in 1994. I wanted to be part of the Justice for Janitors movement. See some of my janitors that I've worked with for 20 years over there. And I made a decision that I wanted to be part of something that was changing the lives of immigrant families, allowing people to put food on the table, shelter over their heads, and take care of their families. And when I started in 1994, we were organizing janitors at Warner Center, for those of you that are familiar with Los Angeles. Janitors that worked late at night. And while we were talking to them about the potential of going on strike, because at that point they were non-union, earning minimum wage, didn't have health insurance, and most importantly, didn't have dignity or respect on the job. Every janitor I talked to was like, well, we'll go on strike if CLATA says we're gonna go on strike. Well, we'll go on strike if CLATA says. And I would talk to CLATA, and CLATA's like, well, I'm not the leader, right? Anybody here know a reluctant leader that you've worked with as an organizer? CLATA's like, it's not me, it's not me. And I was like, well, I gotta tell you, it kinda is you. And CLATA made a decision to stand up for herself, for her family, and for her coworkers. We took the janitors out on strike in Warner Center. We got a contract, significant raises, family health insurance. And that was a significant victory for every single one of those janitors and their families. But it was also a significant victory for CLATA, because she had never been a leader, hadn't been able to find her voice, and as a result of going through that experience, CLATA left her abusive husband. And CLATA's story is not the only story that is out there, that when people are involved in campaigns, they find their voice, they're able to affect change, that they then make changes in their own lives. Do I know any organizers in the room? Raise your hand if you're an organizer, right? Raise your hand. Because we have a critical job as organizers. The first thing we have to do is see the potential in people that they don't see in themselves. And then we have to paint a picture about what a future could look like, what a better world could look like, and give people hope that they can achieve it. And then we have to create the campaigns for people to engage in collective action to make those changes be real in their lives and the lives of those around them. I've been in the labor movement for over 20 years. Unions are oftentimes seen as that organization that does stuff for their members, not an organization that does stuff for the common good. And I made a decision after 20 years of organizing in the labor movement that I wanted to join the United Healthcare Workers West. We represent 100,000 hospital workers throughout the state of California, and I wanted to be part of an organization that was willing to take on the responsibility not just of providing for healthcare workers, but providing quality, affordable healthcare provided by culturally competent, well-compensated caregivers. And that meant an organization that was willing to take on institutional sexism, institutional racism, institutional homophobia, transphobia inside of the healthcare industry with the campaigns that we run. and to invest deeply in the leaders inside of the organization to give them the potential to effectuate the type of change that needed to happen. Right now, we're preparing for the largest strike since the UPS strike that happened in the mid-1990s, because Kaiser right now thinks it's more important for them to make profits than to provide the quality patient care that they should be providing, and the workers have had enough, have voted overwhelmingly to go on strike, and in October we go on strike if we don't get what we need to provide for patients. We believe we have a responsibility to provide for the common good, to engage in campaigns that do that. Maria was a worker who worked in a dignity facility in Bakersfield. And when we started doing health fairs to enroll people into Obamacare, she was there. And she's like, wow, I can help people. What an empowering experience. When she had to take on her boss, her coworker said, you have to lead us. And Yesenia, just like Clara, was a reluctant leader. But she stepped into that role, and just like Clara, that transformation led her to leaving her own abusive relationship, because she felt the power of being able to affect change in the broader world by being a leader. People's path to power happens through collective action, their ability to raise their voices, to disrupt the status quo. But it's never enough to just fight for change on the outside without thinking about your own organization. So I want to get to the themes of the conference. The first one, reflect. I've been in the labor movement for a long time. It was not an easy place for a woman to be in the labor movement. When I was 22 years old, my supervisor told me that if I went with him to Tijuana and slept with him, that I'd get a promotion. And when I raised that to his female boss, I was told, well, just don't go. When a member approached me and said, I'm willing to be a leader, Triana, but only if you have dinner with me Friday night, I didn't know what to do. I was a baby organizer, like I want the campaign to be successful. Do I go out with him and then he'll be a leader and then we'll win and that's good and is that okay? And when I asked people, well, what should I do? Everyone's like, well, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, that's not helpful. So those are the types of experiences that you have in the labor movement as a woman. And when I reported things and the institution didn't know how to deal with them, after 10 examples, 15 examples of that, you go numb. And you stop wanting to report it because the institution can't handle it. And they don't know how to tell you what to do or how to deal with it. When I came to UHW, it felt different. When we had issues that arose amongst our 350 staff, we dealt with them. We did an investigation. We took action against the people that were perpetrating. We did what it is that we thought we needed to. But as the Me Too movement emerged and all of these different stories came up, I was like, wait a second. This is not enough. And I have a lot of privilege. I am a white, heterosexual, cis, middle-class woman in a position of power in a large organization, and I was not taking that responsibility seriously for what it is we needed to do inside of the organization to do things differently. We did our sexual harassment training, right? The one that you're all supposed to do, where the lawyers come in, the managers sit in a room, they don't pay attention and they sign a form. Sound familiar? That happens in organizations all across the world. And our organization reflects the society we live in. The racism, the sexism, all of those things exist inside of our organization because we exist inside of a larger world. The question is, what are we going to do to take that on? So I started calling around to different organizations like, hey, do you guys do a different type of sexual harassment training? Do you actually look at discrimination against all protected classes? Do you talk about systems change? Is there a framework? And I can't tell you how many conversations I had with people, we'll do a one-off training. I'm like, no, thank you. It's not what I'm asking for. I am asking for a partner in crime to create transformational change. Will you do that? Huh? What? And then I found CALCASA. And it was literally a totally different conversation when I was like, I want to do systems change. That's so exciting. How are we going to do that? When do we get started? And that was a breath of fresh air because I don't know how to do this. And I needed help from people that were experts, like every single person in this room, for what it is that you have offered and done that created the conditions for us to build the partnership with CALCASA. And the first thing we did is radically change the way we did our managers' trainings. We worked with CALCASA on a trauma-informed approach, on an upstander training, and we moved our managers through that training by dealing with real-life scenarios of things that had happened or could happen between staff, with staff and members. After we did the managers training, we decided that we were not just going to do a training for our managers, but that all of our staff needed to go through a training. And we engaged in a training with all of our staff. Then we institutionalized that every 6 months, we were going to have a training so any new staff within the first 6 months of coming into the organization was going to have that. And a trauma-informed approach meant that we were actually, as organizers, we're really good at stopping bad things, but we don't actually deal with a person who is the victim, target, survivor, thriver. So we learned how to do that through the trauma-informed approach that CALCASA brought into our organization. People experience racism, sexism, sexual harassment all of the time. But by learning how to not just be a bystander, but an upstander, we learned how to develop the skills that we needed to be able to interrupt that behavior when it was happening. And that created a different type of culture inside of the organization. But the final thing that we did was also change our policy. So our policy is about our responsibility as warriors for social justice to also be warriors to ensure that sexual harassment doesn't happen and that we create the conditions that it is no longer part of our culture. Because of all of that, when the Kavanaugh hearings were happening, I was very triggered. I was raped when I was 12 years old. And when I saw the hearings and saw the type of questioning she had to go through, I was brought back to that moment. But what I realized, because of the work that we had done up till then, is it wasn't just me that was getting triggered in that moment. So I made a decision to write a letter to the entire staff about my experience and how I was being triggered by what was happening with the Kavanaugh hearings, and that there were others in the room, others in our organization that might be experiencing the same thing. And the outpouring that I got of "me too," and the outpouring that I got of, it never would have occurred to me, Triana, that you experienced that because you're a strong woman. Thank you for sharing it, opened my eyes. And so we were able to do more of what it is that we wanted, but it's not enough. So we reflected, got rid of the numbness, we transformed by partnering with CALCASA and trying to change the culture inside, but we have not acted as much as we need to. So we are 350 staff in UHW, but we have 100,000 members. So what is our responsibility in the way in which we are going to make all 100,000 of our members champions for culture change to prevent and stop sexual assault? How are we going to think on scale of the ways in which we change the healthcare system so that it responds to victims, survivors, targets, thrivers in a way that adequately deals with their needs? How are we going to think bigger, think bolder, do more, and challenge ourselves, not just what can I do, but how am I going to challenge myself to look at a room like this and say, we are all leaders? How are we affecting change, not just with us, but bigger, broader, bolder? At UHW, we have not done enough. I feel like we have done a lot more than a lot of other labor unions. But it's not enough. And in the times that we are in, The thing that we need to challenge ourselves to every single day is, are we operating on scale? Are we bold enough in our vision? And are we ready to step into the power and make that the reality for all of us? So I wanted to thank all of you for the honor and the privilege to be part of this community, for us to link arms in this struggle together and figure out how it is that we are going to not just deal with sexual assault when it happens, prevent it, but create a culture where it just doesn't happen anymore. Thank you.